Now it's 1863. After the resignation of Burnside, Fightin' Joe Hooker is put in command by Lincoln of the Union Army. Hooker devises a clever scheme to flank Robert E. Lee as he's withdrawing from Fredericksburg, but he hesitates. So terrified is he of Lee that he figures that what looks like to be a golden opportunity to attack Lee is really a trap. It wasn't, but that's what the fear of Lee did to the North. And at Chancellorsville, Lee, realizing Hooker is there finally, will split his army. He'll use the main force to hold Hooker in place by attacking it from the front. He'll send, of course, Stonewall Jackson to attack Hooker from the side, rolling up the Union Army. The U.S. Army does get away, but it's a major defeat. But it's maybe a bigger defeat for the South, because although they win the battle convincingly, Stonewall Jackson is shot and killed by a Southern soldier who mistakes him for a Union soldier. Then Lee will never really be the same after this militarily. Jackson was incredibly important to what Lee did. Lee will say Jackson will be shot in his left arm and it'll be amputated before his death. And Lee will say after the amputation, Thomas, you have lost your left arm, but I have lost my right. Meanwhile, in the West is actually the more important part of the war. It doesn't get the glory and the prestige, and it didn't get it at the time. It doesn't get it today. Everybody likes to focus on Robert E. Lee and the Eastern Theater. But really what Grant is doing in taking control of the Mississippi River has more impact ultimately on winning the war. And what Grant has been working on in the spring of 1863 is taking the last southern fort on the Mississippi River, and that's Vicksburg. And Grant does something new here, and he lays siege to it. He digs big trenches around it, and he just doesn't let any supplies into the fort and starves it out. And on July 4th of 1863, Vicksburg will finally surrender. This cuts Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas off from the Confederate States and severely cripples the Southern war effort. In response to this, Robert E. Lee is going to propose an invasion of Pennsylvania to try to get European support and to try to pull Grant off his siege from Vicksburg. And in June, so back when Grant started the siege really, Lee will invade into Pennsylvania. Lincoln, by this time, will have fired Joe Hooker and replaced him with a man named Meade. Meade is kind of a temporary commander until they can find somebody more appropriate for the job. But ironically, Meade, who's relatively unimportant otherwise, will be the general during the most famous of all the Civil War battles, be the winning general. And with all these big-name generals around, it's funny that he's the guy who ultimately wins Gettysburg. Gettysburg takes place from July 1st to July 3rd. As Vicksburg is falling, Gettysburg is going on. The Southerners make a crucial mistake. They get to the town of Gettysburg first, but they fail to take the high ground, this ridge that overlooks the battlefield. It is this high position that the Union gets that will allow them to win the battle ultimately. Lee will throw his men, and by this time Lee is fairly desperate, against this ridge fortified by Union soldiers time and again over the course of 3 days. The final assault is called Pickett's Charge, and this is just a suicidal charge based on really kind of ludicrous ideas of Southern honor that has no chance of success. And on July 4th, on the same day that Vicksburg finally falls, Lee leaves the battlefield at Gettysburg. It's amazing these two critical points in the war happen on the same day. Months later, Abraham Lincoln will come to this battlefield at Gettysburg, one of the largest battles of the entire war, one of the costliest, and he'll give, of course, his Gettysburg Address, which we'll look at in class. But there it is if you want to pause and read it. There it is. Now, so here's what's going on, and you see Lee's invasion of Pennsylvania. You see the convergence of armies in Gettysburg there. Now in the West, in Tennessee, the Northern General Rosecrans, is pursuing Braxton Bragg. Bragg will hold at Chickamauga, which is one of my favorite words, on September 19th to the 20th of 1863, and Rosecrans will fail to break through Bragg's line. Bragg will manage to counterattack and seize Chattanooga, but here comes Grant. So here's Chickamauga. You can look at the tolls there if you want. There's Bragg taking Chattanooga, but Grant is going to come to Chattanooga and defeat Bragg's army at Chattanooga November 23rd to 25th of 1863. This now gives the Union Army control of the Tennessee River, the other major river that the South was dependent upon. And the South is, as you can see, just simply being choked to death.